relieve the pressure on fund balance. Can everybody back there hear Dina?
Oh, okay.
This new system is just, well, I can't, I mean, I can hear you, but I can't hear you.
Mhm.
So personnel, at our last meeting, we chose specific positions to be funded at 50%. Some of those are being hired for, so we've had to bump those back up to 100% because they're current positions. As we are lucky enough to hire and fill positions, we will have to adjust that. So that number has gone downward. I think it's at about $800,000 right now in savings. Payroll will continue to move and change until pay period 14, which closes on 7/3.
Oh, you're little.
Okay. And our remaining items are specific positions, requests for specific raises for specific positions. And then, of course, we have the pay plan increase of the 2.5 million that's sitting in there. And I notice I have a typo. Okay, so our ARPA funding, where we are right now, we sent out a form, information collection form on the preferences of the elected officials of what they would like to see the ARPA funds used for. We have marked a few items which we'll show in detail here in a few minutes of what could possibly be used in the budget backfilled by ARPA funds. Most of those items are one-time items. There's a few items like Panhandle Health where we could use ARPA funds to fund that. However, when the ARPA funds runs out, then we're way behind. So something also to consider. And then revenue. So here are revenue sources. I'll bring those up in greater detail at the end of the presentation. But suffice to say, we're using about 1.6 million in fund balance right now is what we're using for the current budget of assigned fund balance. There is some restricted fund balance in there as well. Several of the departments have raised their fees, which has helped. We also took a deep dive into the revenue sharing with the state and we're able to bump up the numbers there, and I'll show where those were. And then our property tax calculation, we received word from the state on Friday that there will be no URD closures in time for this budget cycle. So I did a preliminary calculation based on the template that was provided by the Idaho State Tax Commission to give us our imaginary levy rate to calculate our new growth at 90%. So those numbers are now plugged in to our preliminary summary. So this is where our property tax is currently set. We're at 3% plus new growth. And as I already mentioned, all of the non-property tax revenues besides groups going in and looking at their fee structures, I sent out anything that looked like it needed to be reviewed to the groups, and they all replied back to me last week, so we made adjustments as needed. And the only grants funding that's in the budget, as per our policy, is if it's associated with ongoing employees. All other grant funding, we book when we receive it. And Wednesday, July 14th, we'll be talking to Alliant about the final numbers on what the increase to our benefits are going to be. Then we have the 15th and the 16th, and that's it. Then we're done. So today's a good day to take a good hard look and start thinking about how you want to proceed, what your priorities are, how you want to articulate that in the budget. You can reach out to me, to Michelle, between now and this next meeting to make any adjustments that you'd like to have made. But I think the rest of this meeting should go pretty fast. I'm just going to show you what's what. All right. So here we are. So can you see this? Okay, it's probably hard to see. So right now, our property tax plus new growth is the 54,414,619. That's our property tax funding. non-property tax revenues, fees, that sort of thing. Some restricted fund balance use. Grant funding for our existing personnel. It's primarily sheriff, public defender, that sort of thing. And then our solid waste fund balance that covers their capital, mainly. And then there's our assigned fund balance use. So right now you're at about 1.6. Here's our current payroll as of last payroll. That also includes any of the 50% funded positions that got hired out. Here's the starting B. Here's the B increase. This is what's left of the new personnel ads, the increases, the on-call pay, that sort of thing. Here's our capital, and a little under half of that solid waste self-funded. Then you have your personnel increase. Our last number from Alliant on what they anticipate that the 2022 increase will be for benefits. And there's the total of the new. There's our total budget, and that's what we're off, just a little over $1 million. So, that said, we have some options here that I've laid out. I also want to let you know too, and I know this probably isn't something you'd be interested in, but just for full disclosure, last week when we were at the State Tax Commission meeting, there is another option with foregone. If we decide not to raise the taxes by 3%, and we decide not to take any new growth, and we just put all that aside, we can dip into our foregone up to 8%. And just forego anything new and capture the foregone up to 8%. So that's another funding option to consider. That said, if we look at our current deficit and we say, okay, and this is one scenario, I was playing around with the numbers, it's just something to consider to get you thinking about how you would like to proceed. So right now we have 120,000 sitting in the fair. If we were to reduce that to what we normally give them, and if we funded this last year, the sheriff vehicle lease with fund balance, that would reduce our deficit to that. And if we say, okay, if we want to use ARPA for all of our community support items that are eligible, that's the purple, and if we want to use ARPA funds for all of those general fund items for county assistance that we know are eligible, that puts us over the top, right there. Now, there are other items that are non-capital that could be ARPA approved. These are mainly radios and radio repairs. Now we start getting into building our fund balance back. Panhandle Health, like I said before, this is this year. Next year it'll be about 1.6. We could potentially use ARPA funds to pay for Panhandle Health, and that money could go back into fund balance because we'd be relieving pressure on fund balance. But again, one-time sort of thing. Same thing with this, but we know that county assistance is kind of in a state of churn as the legislature decides what it's going to do with county assistance. So these are some options. I could send this spreadsheet to you so you can see it in greater detail. Other part of this too is if we decided to delay, right now this is funded with fund balance, and I'll just throw this out here. We know that IT right now is working on the on-base project, and they're down a few people. The ExecuTime automated timesheet project would probably take a 9-month implementation window. Chances are if we paid for it this year, it probably would get delayed anyway because there probably just isn't enough people to get it done. Plus, we haven't really had time to look at any other solutions. If we delayed it a year, we could look at other vendors and maybe compare and for features and give us more time to kind of think about that. So that potentially could restore fund balance. Right now it's paid for with fund balance. Again, just throwing it out there. And then there is possible ARPA eligible CapEx, mainly HVAC, that could be ARPA eligible. If that funding went through, we would be able to restore our fund balance that we currently have put aside for those projects. So we could potentially build back our fund balance to that. So again, just something to think about. Rather than relying solely on fund balance, we could potentially cut a few things, look for alternate funding for some things, or just hold off. You could hold off on anything that we determine to be ARPA eligible, or we think it's ARPA eligible. You could just cut it, and then when the ARPA money came in, it could be funded then. So timing, funding, that sort of thing.
So which items, I think you indicate that, okay, there's possible ARPA funding, right?
Right.
The B budget items?
Right.
The 420,000?
Yep. So that's community support in purple, and the green is county assistance that we have to pay for out of general fund. That isn't covered with restricted funds.
So what do you recommend, Dina?
Well, I think that, these items up here, we have to pay for anyway.
Okay.
These items, traditionally, you've paid every year. You have a choice to pay them or not to pay them. ARPA's pretty clear that for community support such as this, it's pretty much a slam dunk.
Okay.
For funding. But you could make it contingent on receiving ARPA funds, or you could just pay for it and then be reimbursed later. So again, it's timing, but you still are about $1 million shy.
Is anything related to the fair ARPA eligible?
We're still finding that out. However, there is I can't remember what it's called, but it's vendors that have like performing arts or like venues, like that kind of thing. There is a separate tranche of grants that aren't ARPA related that could fit
How about
really well
ADA?
into that. Now that's another area too. Right now with ARPA, as far as we understand it, and we did talk to our auditors, because the fair is not a blended unit and we just give them an amount and then they operate separately, that the revenue calculation part of ARPA, they probably wouldn't be part of that. They're asking their connections with the Treasury Department to see how we would treat that, but there are other options for the fair with other grant vehicles, so we are looking into that.
Okay.
All right. So now let's look at revenue. So this is just the real high level revenue to give you a breakout of where the revenue is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So we have several types of revenue. This is on a elected official basis of non-tax, non-grant revenue, fines, fees, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That also includes your state revenue sharing. Solid waste, obviously. Fund balance use is broken down here. Solid waste, there's your assigned amount, that restricted amount. So we're using about $3 million total in fund balance, but only about 1.6 in assigned. Here's the grant funded positions by department. You can see that public defense grant is driving a lot of that.
Has that been verified?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is all according to current positions. This is all position driven.
Okay.
Yep. So there's all your non-taxable revenue, which is about almost exactly half of your total. So it's kind of interesting to see how that all shakes out. Let me go to another spot here.
When would the first, assuming everything works out, when are the first the first half of the ARPA funds due to arrive?
We would have to apply,
Go ahead.
and then if everything goes through, Steve said it could be like 10, 20 days from the approval of the application. So we would have to put together a plan, bring it to you. You would approve for us to apply. We'd go out online, we would apply, and then hopefully 10 days after that, we would know.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't take very long.
When do you expect to have that to us, roughly?
Well, as soon as we can get it together.
All right. I'm not trying to pin you down.
Yeah. We do want to submit our list of questions to the Treasury during the comment period, which ends July 16th,
Okay.
to verify that the projects that the electeds have brought forward would pass muster.
Okay.
So we're meeting tomorrow. So my guess is Steve will have something to talk with you about at the elected officials meeting over where we are on
Yeah,
Wednesday.
we canceled it.
Oh, you did cancel it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I spoke with Steve this morning. He didn't
Okay.
see any reason to do it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
We're still in the early stages. So I wanted to show you the change in the intergovernmental. I think I actually sent this to you, but I wanted to just talk you through it. So what you're looking at right now are the three areas where we tend to take a second look at revenue sharing. So the money collected for state revenue sharing at the BOCC level in Fund 10 and Fund 15, that's mainly sales tax? No, that's not sales tax. That would be other revenue sharing amounts. So our deliberations amount, our amount plugged for this year was slightly under what we received for 2020. So we bumped that up to about just a little over what we received in 2020.
Okay.
Because IAC assured us that a lot of these revenue sharing, we should make at least as much as we did in 2020, probably a little more, but to be conservative, we just thought, well, we don't really need to go under 2020. Let's try to get it close to what 2020's was, or just bump it up, round it up. So we rounded these up. The sales tax, we rounded up a little bit. We first budgeted 2.5. In 2020, we got 2.7, so that's what we put in. We didn't want to go much higher than that. And then the liquor apportionment, we bumped up by about 200,000 up to an even 3 million. So that gave us an extra 1.8 million in revenue. So that was a nice relief, but we feel comfortable with these numbers. They're pretty conservative. We'll probably collect more, but we wanted to make sure that those were in line without getting a little too crazy or a little overly optimistic.
Did you look at the state's projection?
No.
Okay, that's they suggested we look there.
Okay. All right.
That I bet you that'll bump us up a little bit, even remaining conservative.
Okay.
Because they're talking.
Great.
They were talking 600 million. Now they're talking 800 million. Yeah.
Okay. That could help us.
Yeah, the surplus. Right. Yeah.
Then I have another
Okay.
different additions as well. I thought they would have come through to you by now, but I want to double check with the departments.
Okay.
Right. Release it to the public. So I am also working with about 6 different departments for some B budget cuts.
Okay.
That'll get us closer.
Okay.
And the problem is, I just was made aware of today, and Marissa may want to speak to this, or Jennifer.
No, Marissa, yeah. She's
Okay.
got it ready.
We are now probably going to be subject to review, and we are going to need more positions. And so that's part of the reason why I'm digging deep in other areas to find out if we can get some of these positions. So Marissa, if you want to, you just need to come to a table with a microphone on it.
Hi, I'm here to share with you about us
expressing the urgency for the positions we did ask. Again, we were very conservative in what we asked for. Our civil department has been struggling to keep up with the load of our daily electronic filings. They're getting an average of 10,000 legal pages a day to review and process. They can only keep up with approximately 3,500 pages a day max, and that's with the help of overtime. There's 8 people in that department, and with an average of something going on with 1 or 2 of those, we have 2 other outside people helping them that used to be in that department that are still doing their regular work. I looked at the overtime for those main 8 people that were working on that since the beginning of this current fiscal year. So October 1st, they lodged 962 hours of overtime. That's an average of 120 per person. Trying to maintain that and still not able to keep up. Even with those people working substantial overtime, as of today, they're working on filings from June 13th. So the Supreme Court is asking for a written explanation of the cause and the plan on how we are to remedy the situation. I have my idea to remedy it would be to immediately approve the conversion of the part-time person position we've been holding open in hopes that we could get that full-time in the fall, and immediately convert that, and the early approval of one of our civil clerk 2 asks.
Okay. You got a couple things in your budget. Travel. Carlene's in particular. Sorry, she's not here to defend herself.
Two separate, completely two separate.
We talking 2 different things
Yeah,
here?
Yes.
Carlene's, and actually I'm working with her on that, and she's coming down.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
So
I'll let it go.
I just did touch base with her today, but yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. So that's part of the issue is Carlene's under the judge's budget.
Yes.
And this is the clerk's budget.
This is the clerk's
This
budget.
is the
Okay.
65 clerks that we have to do
Okay.
this. That's kind of an issue. So I imagine, during writing your letter, I don't know if the Supreme Court's going to say, okay, yes, I agree with that, or no, I don't agree with that. So I don't know if you go to HR before you hear from them or after you hear from them. I don't know. That's something we can just talk about. So I am concerned about some of the pressures, and I know Barry's got issues too. So in my digging, like I said, I think I've got one more revenue source, and then if Dina goes to the state site to pick up maybe some more liquor tax and sales tax, and then with the B budget cuts in the 6 departments that I'm looking at, I'm hoping to get some people back, some new people.
Okay.
Because we can't be under, Supreme Court deciding how we're going to
What do you think the cuts will amount to? Have you any idea? Roughly.
I don't know. I'm just picking a number out. 100,000.
Okay.
That might get us 2 positions or something.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just don't know at this point. But I imagine that the revenue.
The thing is, we're not that far from balancing if we're willing to make some decisions. Back to your first overhead, Dina.
Yep. Let's
Um,
get back to there.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, I just am uncomfortable taking ongoing expenses from ARPA dollars. That's just really a concern of mine because we may never get it back. And if the state continues to want to further restrict things, then I just get concerned with that. The handheld, the 3 green ones, are those going away in March or not?
No.
Those we will always keep.
Actually, they will be, except the DE exams. Let me look here. Yeah, police hold should be picked up with this new bill on March 1st.
Okay.
She will still have to do at this point. The state is looking into, because there's, I guess, 2 processes for those DE exams, but that will still have to be done. And then the mental health should also be picked up on March 1st. And those are coming out of Fund 10 and not restricted funds.
So can those be cut in half?
I think those are budgeted.
No, they're budgeted.
Those are
partial year
budgeted for, okay.
forecasting that the state's coming in and saying we're going to take care of those aspects
But
through Panhandle.
potentially we could fund those with ARPA funds because those are potentially going away, so that won't hurt us.
Be a one-time thing.
Yeah. It'll be a one-time.
And I think it really that's a good point. What it comes down to is I think we need to make some assumptions based on our best knowledge, and if that's the case, let's make that adjustment if you're confident. You know, in the final analysis, if we screw up, and let's say Treasury comes back and denies certain components, then we have to resort to fund balance.
Right. Well, and for budget purposes, until we actually have the money in our hands, we'll be dipping into fund balance to cover these things with the understanding that when the money comes in, we reimburse ourselves.
But still, we're at that 1.6 threshold right now. I mean, it's underneath the 2 million that I'm keeping in my mind, which was money was unexpected from last year.
Mhm.
So
Right. Yeah.
that's why I'm a little more comfortable keeping that 1.6 in
Right.
fund balance.
Okay, I was going to say for the Panhandle Health Share, so starting March 1st, we'll have to start picking up the state's basically portion of what they were paying the health districts. And that was what, 84,000 divided by 2. So that typically would have come out of restricted funds. We have in Fund 40 about Indigent Fund 2.9 million. And then the 800,000 plus is what you guys contribute as the county. Again, with the ARPA funding, you have to basically make that commitment, I believe, by 2024 and then expend that money by 2026. And IAC did say that the Panhandle Health would be one of the first qualifiers in their mind. So again, you have to prepare, like you said, because what happens when that source is no longer there come 2026. But
Well, I imagine, depending on how the URDs fall, I wouldn't want to take the ones next year. But if we had URDs that came due by 2026, that would pick up that Panhandle share, then that might be a good trade-off. So
What does 2023 look like? 3.4? Is that where the 3.4 closure comes in?
There's going to be two. We thought that we would have the Post Falls Celtice,
But not this year.
not this year, and then the big Coeur d'Alene Lake District. That's the big one that is going to
Fiscal
close next
23?
year.
Mhm.
Yep. Yes, but again, at 90% or no, at 80% value.
I had that sheet, but I'm sure it's in a safe place now. But I have all the closures and what dates they are.
Yeah, I have it too.
It is now.
Oh, yeah, we're too far back. Okay.
So I would be interested in scheduling another deliberation quickly, sometime in the next week and I think then we can probably balance by then.
Okay.
I will bring forth the positions that I know we cannot survive without. And hopefully I'll have funding sources for those.
Whoa, I kind of went
Did
crazy.
you didn't I send the one from Rich? Did I send you that?
I might have it. I don't remember seeing it. I might have it buried somewhere because I think I had got it last year or the year before.
Right.
But this is based on what Stan gave me back in 2019. So these are the years. These two pink ones are the ones we thought were going to close, but they're going to close so late this year that they won't hit the budget correctly. So these two, this is the 2006 value, and we know for all of those older URDs, we take whatever their current value is, and then we subtract out that 2006 value, and then whatever's left, we take 80% of that and multiply it by that rate that we get from the State Tax Commission. So these definitely next year, because they are closing this year, just not in time. But then it looks like we've got a couple more coming.
Yeah.
Now, whether they close in time or not, but that one looks pretty big.
Mhm.
I believe the tax commission said July 1st, correct? Is when before July 1st.
Yeah.
For us to receive that.
So these are the 2020 values based on the December value worksheet for each one of these URDs. And that's the biggie. So if you take that minus that times 80%, whatever the rate is, that's
What, the 650 minus the 191?
Yeah, gives you the 458,
Oh,
but
okay,
that's
yep.
that's 2020's value. If we wait till 2021, 2022, that's gonna go up even more.
Right, so then you would
Right.
multiply 458
Right.
times 80%, then times the
Right.
temporary levy rate.
So as an example, my estimation, if this one, the little one, were to close this year, there's the 2006 value. This is the estimated value in 2021. That would be the increment returned times 80% times the preliminary levy rate that I calculated on the L2. So if this would have landed in time, we would have gotten about 102,000.
Okay.
So not enormous, but better than nothing.
That's almost one of Barry's positions.
So this is our property tax calculation, just as a refresher and just for the audience at home. So this is last year's levy amount. We add back that property tax replacement, so there's our base amount. That's what we start with. 3% gives us that. New construction, 80 or 90% in the new construction from the assessor times the preliminary levy rate we calculated on the L2 gives us that for new growth. So there's our total. That's our current foregone balance. We know we can't take the whole thing, but that's our taxing authority. And that's how we get to that. Now we'll be getting a property tax replacement number from the State Tax Commission eventually, and that'll reduce our proposed levy amount. And if we were to not give back any of the 3% this year, our foregone would stay the same.
At 10.6.
Yep. And then, just for a review, HB 389, this is how the tax rules changed. Your 3% increase based on prior year tax amount, pretty much the same, can't exceed 3%. Your new construction, 90% of the value times that preliminary levy rate. And that can't exceed 8% when you add it to this piece.
Mm-hmm.
URD closure, 80% of that increment returned.
The preliminary levy rate.
Not subject to the cap, but you can only take 80% of that with the preliminary levy rate. Foregone, you can take 1%, but it can't exceed that total 8%, right? So you could take
It's foregone's on top of 8%, so it's 9% total.
9%, okay.
Operation
And if you
maintenance.
want to take one-time foregone, you can take 3% in 1 year, but you only get to use it for that year.
For that
And
one.
then talking to Alan last week, if you wanted to throw all of this out, you could take some foregone by itself and just forego all this other.
I think we're close enough that it's probably not going to need to happen.
Okay. But that's your property tax calculation in a nutshell. So it sounds like we've got some options and some changes coming here. Any other ideas? Would you like to look at capital again? Do you want to plug in for these items? Any of these items, do you want to plug in fund balance for those, or do you want to wait and come back together maybe later this week and look at it again with the changes in?
I would rather look at it with the changes.
Okay,
Because otherwise I feel like we're just reshuffling the deck.
right. Okay, so
That's fine.
I just, still all those ones in the purple, I mean, the ones in the green, fine, but the ones in the purple, unless we're going to be prepared in a couple of years to tell them, sorry, we no longer have money to do this, then I just rather.
it's not a huge amount.
And if we do, fine, we have to tell them sorry, but I'd rather tell them a year or two in advance, be prepared for this.
Okay. So anyway, stuff to consider. I didn't send you this piece of this document, but I can. So you can look at it and look at the calculations and see how the numbers flow.
So we're at what, 1.65? No,
You're out
no, it's less than
just a little over $1 million.
Yep.
1 point.
Oh,
or,
that's the deficit.
1.1.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Yeah. No worries. There's a lot of numbers.
And we started where?
9.
We started at 9.
Well, but 9 was with an 8% cap.
Yeah.
So
So it was more than that.
it's more than that.
So good work.
Important for people to know that
Yeah.
this was a very difficult process for
Right.
employees and department heads to work with,
Yeah.
and we appreciate it.
And a lot of people and a lot of smaller departments too have come forward and asked to have their B budgets cut voluntarily to help.
Dina, on the reduction of the fare
Mm-hmm.
from 80 to 40.
No, from 120 to 80.
Oh, from 100. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We just
Oh,
cut
40 is the
out.
reduction. Forgive me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We would just cut 40. We would just cut them down to what they normally get.
Okay, the 700 for the vehicles.
Yeah.
Are we talking what, fund balance?
Yeah. Do you want to use fund balance rather than levy for this last year?
So my
So you're-
concern with that
Go ahead.
is going forward, we will not have any money for replacement cars. So I can't support that because then we're pretty much telling the sheriff's department no more cars. So I really want to try to protect that all the way till the last minute. If we find no other way to balance, I'll rethink. But at this point, I want to keep that as taxation because I think we have a good program right now to do that. So, and I think Barry and Jennifer both had, or at least Barry.
No, I
had
think
something to
Barry was
say.
trying to.
Yeah, Barry, go ahead.
Part of the discussion was about using fund balance and then replenishing it, and I wasn't sure that there was an estimate of unspent funds in the 2021 budget that could be considered as a pool of money. I mean, every year I think money goes back to fund balance, and I just don't know what that number might be, but something the board might want to consider.
Which we usually do around the end of July. So right before we say, okay, this is it, this is our balanced budget, we
Mhm.
usually look at that number.
Mhm.
And just to see, because a lot of times we will filter projects through. We'll do the one-time fund balance stuff, say, hey, you've got money in your budget this year, go do
Right.
that. So yeah, that's always a consideration. Just doesn't work well with people. Decisions.
What about the remaining $2 million from CARES?
It's about 400,000 now. if
What did we
use
take?
this.
Well, we've used, it will replace the fund balance use when we roll into the new year. So we have an extra $2 million, less the AD system.
It's not restricted. That's the big thing
Yeah,
versus
it's not
ARPA. We're going
restricted.
to have to be careful.
Right. So in my mind, when we started this process, I didn't want to use more than $2 million for fund balance this year. Right now, 1.6. Now, $500,000 of that might be ARPA eligible. Then in that case, we'll only have used 1.1 of the 2.
So we just relieve pressure on fund balance use.
Yeah.
Through ARPA.
But that's what it's there. It's for one-time things. And so I love having a big piggy bank, but not to the detriment of holes in the shoes. So
And that's the other part of it is if there's capital projects that you would just rather not do unless they're ARPA funded, we can just cut them.
I don't,
That seems almost the most sensible way to go about it.
Well, it's one way to do it. You can fund it with fund balance and then it's in the budget, or you can cut it and wait for the ARPA funds and then allocate the ARPA funds.
I'd rather just leave it and then have the ARPA backfill those because it's HVAC. I mean, to me,
we need
it's
to do it anyway.
We need to do it anyway. So it's
Right.
disingenuous for me to tell the public, hey, we're not spending that money when we come back mid-year and go, well, it's 95 degrees in the building. We got to do something. So I'd rather just keep it like
My big problem is the fare.
Mhm.
Every year they take it in the shorts. And every year we say, wait till next year. But at the same time, we use the fare like crazy for COVID vaccinations, for jury selection, for a whole bunch of things. And I don't like them being our piggy bank.
Well, we did pay them for that.
Oh, I know. But I mean,
Couldn't have
it also
events.
cut their revenue generation, the whole COVID thing, by
Sure.
what they say, 75% last year.
Right, which
And
is why we're looking
I
at other
wonder
sources.
how many departments could get by on a 75% reduction. I just don't like going there first.
So, Bill, you weren't here this morning, but what Dina had mentioned this morning was there is a whole bunch of grants now coming available for event venues just like the fairgrounds.
Mhm.
And apparently Nancy Pluff might have something to add.
Sorry.
So that's kind of exciting.
I do. We estimated the wage increases. We plugged in 2.5 as a placeholder. It's actually 2.1 and some change. So we left the extra 350,000 in there for retention bonuses. But if we take the one-time retention bonuses out of ARPA funds from premium pay, then we can reduce the wage increases down to 2.2 and still have a little wiggle room.
Okay, so that's
Yep.
another good option.
And that'll be another thing we'll want to
Yeah.
weigh too, because the ARPA funds for premium pay, there's a threshold of like pay bands. They want to focus on lower paid employees. So it'll,
I have a question.
yes.
I'm at home, I'm watching, and I hear everybody talk about ARPA. And I know we've defined this before, but could you tell us exactly
Certainly.
what it is, where it comes from, and how much it might be?
Certainly. So ARPA funds, ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. It's a program that was put through the U.S. Treasury Department, and it is giving grant money directly to cities and counties of a certain size. And we are the direct recipient of those funds rather than it coming through the state like the CARES Act did. There are specific rules around using these funds, and some of them haven't been written yet. So like the COVID task force, we put together an ARPA group to look at all the requests from the departments and apply the rules and work with legal, with the treasurer, and our grants experts to determine what's in, what's out, what we can use the money for. These items are items brought forward that seem to fit with the actual intent of the ARPA funds. Community support, anything that has to do with health and the well-being of our citizens, such as county assistance, ventilation systems, HVAC systems.
How does the build out of the shell at the jail fit into that?
Communal living facilities, jails are called out specifically
Good.
for social distancing, for ventilation, for medical facility in the jails. So that one seems like pretty much a good fit, but there are others. New construction, not so much, but expanding current facilities to accommodate social distancing. We believe that there's some ability there to use the funds, but again, we're still looking at that, watching as the changes.
Well,
in
the
the
rules
law
are
come
still being
Right.
promulgated, so.
Yes,
And it might help with the new building depending on how we approach it.
right,
More from an expansionary versus a new
Expansion of
structure.
the building.
Expansion, yeah.
right.
And you know, just going back to your earlier point, Leslie, I don't have a problem in budgeting for these items and reimbursing later. My only concern is that as we do that, we're struggling to achieve a balance, even though we have a reasonably good idea that we're going to be compensated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, there's two separate things though.
Go ahead.
The purple part, where even if we're compensated, that's still ongoing.
Yes.
Where the HVAC system, let's just use that. Yeah, we're taking out a fund balance, but will be
We'll be
compensated.
reimbursed, right?
Right, but it's still a one-time thing. My concern is, yes, that ARPA fits that, and we can get reimbursed for that. But then eventually, the reimbursement runs out, the savings account runs out, and now it's got to come out of your checkbook. So that's where I really don't want to.
That's where you have a concern.
Yeah, I don't want to touch any ongoing.
Yeah, anything with ongoing funding will be difficult.
And the thing with the ARPA is it has to be spent by 2006.
26.
2026
Committed by
committed by
2024 and
2024.
spent by 2026.
So technically, even if we were to use the ARPA funds for those community items, we'd be in good shape for the next 3 years,
Yes.
assuming we put that money aside and budgeted it for that application. Thereafter is another matter, but I can't think 5 or 6 years out at this point. Because
But
anything
would you
can
be
happen.
underfunded by that amount 6 years down the road?
I'm sorry?
Would you be underfunded by that amount? So if you're funding ongoing expenses, and to Leslie's point, you have all these ongoing expenses that you're using this as a stopgap. Now suddenly all the money's gone. It's like, oh gosh, now my budget's bloated.
So yeah,
because
so
I'm
now
under-
we're back to fees and grants
Right,
to make that up, yeah.
sure. So, anything you'd like for us to research?
I will have a list
Okay,
of stuff to bring forward
okay,
once I touch base with everybody else again. So,
I've got a few too, so I'll.
Okay,
I'll do
great.
something.
so by next meeting, I mean, I think we can get there by next meeting.
so we probably should put a meeting on the books then, before her next one on the 14th.
Well, yeah, what did you have for the next one, July 14th?
14.
Yeah. 14th.
Yeah, we need to go sooner.
And I will be out of town starting on the 6th of July through the 13th. But before that, I'm very flexible on time.
And today's the 21st.
Yes.
When do we start BO?
Next
POE
week,
next week.
yeah, but we don't know. We may have time available, and I imagine. I mean, this meeting's taken less than an hour, so
Yeah.
You want to schedule something for early next week? Or do
Sure.
you want to? That work?
actually next Monday afternoon, because we're trying not to schedule any BOE next Monday afternoon.
Let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, I try not to make these real long. So, awesome. Yeah, there's
Okay.
so many ways. It's I don't want to be flippant about it, but it's only $1 million.
Well,
So-
how are they told? Less than 1%.
Yeah, I mean, we've closed this gap before easily.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there has been tremendous progress made. So you should feel good about that. This is just, the devil's in the details. And I really appreciate, just as a finance person, that this board is looking at this long term. Rather than just, yep, we can cover this with this and we're done and we're out. But no, 5 years from now, where are we going to be? You're thinking about that long term, and that really demonstrates fiscal responsibility.
Marissa, did you have something?
Yeah,
else?
do you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that while I did ask for something that I thought would be an immediate resolution to the situation, I also am, reinstating my request for all our positions and conversions for like retention and such. Just wanted
Okay.
to reiterate that.
But I think there is a possibility that we would want to come before the board sometime in the next month for converting that part-time to full-time,
Mhm.
and then asking for one civil just to
That's
keep on
fine.
these
Yeah. Well, I mean,
e-filings so we
if-
don't get behind.
put it this way, make it for the next HR, okay, not this week, but 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
And then if you hear from Supreme Court before then we can have another discussion. But hopefully you'll submit your plan. Supreme Court will come back and say, okay, that's sufficient, or no, here's our suggestions. Then you can address it at the next HR meeting.
Okay, that's what we talked about earlier today, so that works perfectly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we're okay for now, for today.
Okay, great.
And as an added point, I don't know how much more aggressive the legislature is going to get beginning 2023 and going forward, because I think they're going to take some hits for what they've done this year, because cities and counties are up in arms. So I'd like to think that they're barely sensible enough to realize that they better stop at this point.
I also think they're meeting this summer, some of these joint committees with the state and representative and the state senate, and one will be about taxation, maybe urban renewal. So we'll have to keep an eye out, and if you guys want to offer public testimony for that,
Okay,
that's going to
good.
be important.
Yeah, but they better grandfather all the urban renewal. Just saying, anything that's started before their taxes, or before their changes.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Marissa. Thank you, Jen. Public comment.
Robert Norris, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can, yes. Can everybody hear the sheriff? Cool.
Robert Norris, Sheriff. So a couple of weeks ago, I approached the city of Hayden and I told them that their business model for law enforcement cannot be sustained. And I am here to tell you that in the future, we as a county need to look at a public safety strategic plan for the county because we have different calls for service than what we used to just years ago. We have a quantity of calls for service that we didn't have years ago, and we are likely going to be needing more law enforcement resources based on the population explosion that we are experiencing. So I just like us to consider a public safety strategic plan in the future for Kootenai County.
Bring us one.
Well, they're not free. Not free.
Reminds me, I do have the last one.
I was thinking
I do have the
same
last
thing.
one if you want to see that.
Yeah.
No, but in seriousness, on my desktop, I actually have a personnel projection for the next 5 years.
That's where I was just going to go.
Yeah. And so we're already working on that part of it. So yeah, it'd be great if you filled in some ideas there, based on population.
And that's
based
probably,
on numbers.
that's probably the best way to start, Sheriff, is where are we projected in 5 years and then work the plan to that.
We need to take in consideration that we're a county of 167,000, but we're a community of 700,000 because we have an element that comes
Right.
over
Right.
from Washington that consumes the services from the law enforcement standpoint.
Can you put a wall in your 5-year strategic plan?
Sure.
Yep. We also have a problem with certain communities, i.e. Hayden, telling people how low their taxes are. And quite frankly, in my opinion, not paying their fair share.
And
And that's not right. That needs to change for the equity for all citizens of Kootenai County.
And I agree. I agree. I think that I am very hopeful and encouraged by the negotiations that we are currently in, and I'm hopeful we can come up with a resolution over time.
I don't got. Give me some more. I don't got.
And anecdotally, I'm hearing our current population is pushing about 175,000.
Yeah.
So we're well on our way, Sheriff. We hear you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No one? Okay, I've got 2:25, meeting adjourned.